Let's switch back to LSU and to this coaching search specifically. You hear a lot of names being bantered about at this point. Whether that's Lane Kiffin, who always seems to come up. Maybe it's Dan Lanning. Kurt Cignetti obviously just signed that huge extension, so he's not a likely candidate, although he was a very hot name a month ago. But you start to look at a lot of teams that might make the playoff. And we'll take their coach. You're LSU, top 5 job in the country. Just come on. And look, if LSU hired Lane Kiffin, I think Lane Kiffin win a lot of games at LSU. If LSU hired Dan Lanning, I think he win a lot of games at LSU. I don't have a problem with either of those names being lifted. But what I'm telling you is the timing of that doesn't look awesome. Let me explain this and how this could work. Right now, Ole Miss is 7-1. They're ranked 7th in the country. Here's their remaining schedule. They play South Carolina and Oxford. South Carolina right now is 1-5 in the league. They played tough against Alabama, but I think Ole Miss got a pretty good chance to win that game in Oxford. Then Ole Miss plays the Citadel. They're going to win that game. Then they play Florida in Oxford. Florida's fired its coach. The Gators are 3-4 overall. I feel like Ole Miss will probably win that game. And then they go to Starkville to play the Egg Bowl, and State hasn't won a league game in literally over 2 calendar years. So I think it's likely that Ole Miss goes 11-1. I think at their floor, it's 10-2. If they lose 2 of moving forward of South Carolina and Florida at home and at Mississippi State, I'll be shocked. Is it impossible? It is not. I'll be shocked. So right now, I'm working off the assumption that they're going to go 11-1. They might be 10-2. If they're 11-1, at worst, they're going to be the 5 seed. They might be the 4 seed. At worst, they'll be the 5 seed. If they're the 5 seed, they host a game against the G6 winner, Navy, Tulane, whoever, in Oxford. They played Tulane like 5 minutes ago in Oxford and beat them 1,000-0, basically. So if they're the 5 seed and they get a home game against a G6 team, I think they're going to win it. If they're the 4 seed, they get a bye. So all of a sudden, you're talking about the first round, December 19th or December 20th. The second round is New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, which is where Ole Miss would be playing. I don't think it's a big stretch to suggest that Ole Miss is going to have a game New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. So what that tells me is signing day is December 4th. You will not have a head coach in place for the early signing period. Just won't have one. So what are all these early enrollees going to do? Just sign with you blindly? Or sign somewhere else? Or wait? But the early signing period is December 4th. The transfer portal opens January the 2nd. It stands to reason Lane Kiffin could win a game on December 31st or January 1st. And he's still at Ole Miss in the semis. And you're going to go through the transfer portal window and what was the early signing period with no head coach in place. Does that sound like something that you want to do? I think that would be quite a risk. Because you're looking at this roster right now on LSU's team currently. It is going to be a mass exodus. I mean, you can just start naming guys that are not going to be back here next year. Patrick Payton, Jack Piber, Jacobian Guillory, Whit Weeks, Harold Perkins, Mansour Delane, A.J. Halsey. Then you move to the other side of the ball, like Nick Anderson, Chris Hilton, potentially Aaron Anderson. Not going to have Braylon Moore, not going to have Josh Thompson, not going to have a lot of these guys. Bauer Sharp won't be here. Like, you're losing a lot of guys off the front line of your team, and who knows what the younger guys decide to do. Garrett Nussmeier certainly won't be here. And then you compromise your signing class, and then you compromise the transfer portal. Now, if you make the decision, whoever the brass is at LSU that makes this decision, and say, hey, I don't care if we miss the early signing period. It's just a bunch of high school kids who probably would have transferred anywhere. And I don't care that we missed the transfer portal period. Oh, well, we'll field what we field in 2026. This is a decision that we're making for the future of the program. We don't really care about 2026. I understand that. I don't know that a lot of teams operate that way. LSU hired Brian Kelly November the 30th and Ed Ogeron November the 26th. You're talking about 6 weeks later, potentially. Is that something you're willing to do for Dan Lanning or Lane Kiffin? I don't know if Dan Lanning or Lane Kiffin even have any interest in the job whatsoever. I have no idea. But this is going to be hypothetical season for 5 weeks around here. So this is hypothetical number 1 because Lane Kiffin is the top name on every list that I see. The other option in this whole long diatribe that I'm doing here is, what if Lane Kiffin just says, all right, I'm leaving and just leaving Ole Miss and going to LSU? Brian Kelly did that with Notre Dame in 2021. That team had an outside chance to make the playoff. They ended up being 5th in a 4-team playoff. Cincinnati, undefeated, got in over Notre Dame because they beat them. So it was unlikely Notre Dame was going to get a playoff spot, but they were 11-1, and they got ranked 5th by the CFP, and Brian Kelly left. Maybe Lane Kiffin leaves. I just don't see that. I don't see that. Lane Kiffin's a great coach. You look at what he's done at Ole Miss there. Since he took over, and then since 2021, only Alabama and Georgia have won more games in the Southeastern Conference than Ole Miss. That's heavy stuff. But timing is important. And this just feels like you're going to make a handshake deal in a back room. Hey, when you're done with that playoff, we'll hire you. And then they win that first game against Navy, and then they go beat Arizona State or Texas Tech or whoever, and then all of a sudden they're in the semis, and it's January 10th, and LSU, who fired its coach in mid-October, still doesn't have a coach. And then he gets to the semifinals at Ole Miss, and he's thinking, I don't really need to leave. It just seems like a lot to me, y'all. It seems like a lot to me. I'm not saying it's impossible, but National Signing Day is December 4th, and the transfer portal's open January 2nd, and it feels to me like you might want to have a coach ready to go for any and all of that. And I realize that you don't crater the program long-term with a quick fix hire, a settle hire, because you got to make sure that your class doesn't transfer out. You got to make sure that you get these 15 high school signees who might play anywhere 2 years later. I understand how all that works. It's not like it was 10 years ago where you've got to get this signing class in place. You need a staff ready to go because the only way you can build your team is through high school signees. It's not the case anymore. But Lane Kiffin's going to get paid, and I told you yesterday that I don't think money is going to be a huge obstacle because I've now been conditioned to feel that way about LSU because they found money every time they needed to find money. But the timing of this just doesn't feel right. Now, if Ole Miss goes out there and loses to South Carolina and then has a, white knuckler in Starkville against Mississippi State and barely wins it, and then all of a sudden you're looking around and Virginia gets into the playoff and Bama runs a table and Georgia runs a table, and you look around in the SEC and Vanderbilt runs the table, and you feel like Ole Miss's resume is a little bit light because maybe LSU is their best win and Oklahoma is their second best win, and those two teams end up losing 4 and 5 games, and maybe at that point they don't get in, and then you can make the move. There are a lot of hypotheticals that work here, but I feel like the likeliest of scenarios is that Ole Miss goes 11-1, is in the playoff, either gets a bye or wins on December 19th and 20th, so they don't play until New Year's Eve. And if that's the case, man, you're taking a risk of waiting that out. There was a time 10 years ago where LSU could hire Ole Miss's coach no matter what. There was a time 4 years ago where Lane Kiffin would have crawled to Baton Rouge. When LSU hired Brian Kelly, Lane Kiffin would have crawled here. I don't think that time is anymore. I'm not telling you he would never take the job. I'm telling you he won't crawl here. He's got a good job there at Ole Miss. You're in an era where Indiana's ranked second in the country. You're in an era where Vanderbilt is making a push here. You're in an era where Virginia is alive in the ACC. You're in an era that Arizona State has put back-to-back really good teams together. It doesn't have to be the bluest of blue bloods anymore with the amount of talent that's being spread. And Ole Miss is proving it because he wins 10 games every year there. And yes, he has not made the SEC championship game. He has not made the college football playoff. He has not loaded up the trophy case. I get it. but he's sniffing around it. And they'll build a statue of him if he keeps winning 9 or 10 games every year. You win 9 or 10 games here in Baton Rouge, and there are more 9s than 10s, and you're out of the playoff with 9s more than you're in it with 10s, you get run out of town for $50 million buyout. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I think the timing is a little bit iffy. So if you're an LSU fan that is dying for Lane Kiffin, you need South Carolina to go in there and beat him on Saturday. You do. If you're an LSU fan that does not want any part of Lane Kiffin, and there are some of those too, I don't think he's coming here. So that's just one person's opinion based in a timeline, a calendar, and a gut feeling. I just feel like that's probably not the answer here in Baton Rouge. I don't think the timing looks very good. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.